Renee Warren, I would love to start by you sharing with us your woman-owned story.
Eleanor Beaton, I would be delighted to share this story with you. Women owned, okay. So actually, you kind of planted the seed about this question. And the only thing I can think of was when I was 17 years old, my mom told me to go get a job. And I thought that entrepreneurs didn't work a lot and they made a lot of money. So I started a restaurant with my sister. And we
And,
were,
a
we
business where you don't have to work at all.
Yeah, no, stupid. But this was back in like the late 90s. So there was no tap, there was nothing like that. We were literally bringing home at the end of the week, end of the month, like wads of cash rolled with an elastic shoved underneath our bed.
Oh, so you
Yep.
seriously started a restaurant. It wasn't just a dream. You
Oh,
seriously started a restaurant.
so what happened was there was this like chip stand restaurant that was connected to a locally owned gas station. And it was typically the gas station people that would run it because it was a pretty lucrative business. And they just couldn't do it with their kids and stuff. So they're renting out the space. They're like, can someone take over the lease for the summer? And my mom was like, well, is this something you guys want to do? I was like, yeah, let's make a lot of money. Let's do this. Let's go. And wow, I learned a lot very quickly. I, in the weirdest circumstance, was hiring my mom's friends and paying them hourly, hiring people older than me, younger than me, my friends. Um, but let me tell you, when you are passionate about something, believe me, I was not passionate about hand dip hot dogs, hand dip pogos that you would deep fry, but I knew that it was just part of the job. But in pricing and offering the products that we offered, everything was made from scratch. I really got a sense of what it meant to provide a really great product and make money.
That's amazing.
So that was kind of my foray into real entrepreneurship. And a lot has happened since because gosh, I'm not even close to being 17 years old. I have a whole lifetime since then.
So I'm curious, after you did that restaurant essentially as a summer job. So you ran a successful restaurant as a summer job. Do I have that right? Or it actually
Yep,
went beyond the
that's it.
summer? Yeah. Okay.
No, there may have been a little bit of layover between the end of the school year, but really, most places like this were just operating the summertime.
Yeah. Did you think that you would go back to entrepreneurship after that, or did you see yourself going and getting a job inside another business?
Oh, 100%. I thought I was gonna be an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Uh, for me, I loved the freedom. The creative freedom was, like, the biggest thing. I was like, "Oh, I'll figure out how to make money. I just have an idea. I wanna execute on that idea."
Yeah.
So, I went to university, did my undergrad, then I traveled Australia for a year. I got those, like, workers visa. It was a really cool experience. And that was, like, 22 years ago, and we're actually going back in a month. It's gonna be so cool going back. And then did graduate school, which was, with all due respect, a massive joke because I learned more in operating that little tiny restaurant than I did in paying for a whole years of tuition somewhere else. But I knew from the beginning. I kept writing Renee Warren Communications. I don't even know what this looks like, but it was like Renee Warren Communications. And I had my first logo design with my name, and it was a tree. And it was awesome.
Everybody had a tree logo at some point.
Yeah, I was on that trend. It was a really cool tree.
I'm sure it
And
was.
you know what? I'm gonna dig it up and find it. But I knew that I was in the creative space. I had this vivid vision of what my life would look like by the time I'm 30. I was gonna have an advertising agency in Manhattan, 2 kids, a dog, obviously a husband, a house, and a white picket fence. Literally. I didn't achieve all those things.
So
But it
what did happen? Yeah.
So at 30, when those things didn't happen, it's kind of like, when you have this vision for a thing and then you get to that point or you achieve it and you've failed to actually look beyond that goal, it's
Oh,
kind of
yeah.
like now what? Right? Now what do I do? Um, but there's so many things that are unpredictable, especially when you're like 17 or 18 years old and you think this is what your life's going to look like and you actually start living it and you're like, no, I actually don't want that. Or I do want that and I don't know how to get there.
What did you do after graduate school?
So I had my first and only corporate job for 2 years in Toronto. I worked for a company called BizLaunch. We helped train small businesses. And we had contracts with like Bell, Staples, Scotiabank, all of the big companies. We would go into their stores or facilities and facilitate trainings. It wasn't me, but it was the two owners of the company. There was just three of us. And we did 1 year across Canada with Staples. We did, I think, over 300 in-person events, of which I helped manage. So I helped like organize the schedule, fill the seats, get the people in there. This was when also Twitter was kind of the cool social media platform in the world where individuals and businesses were starting to use it for business purposes. And there was no social media playbook. There was no, hey, how do we win this algorithm thing? It was kind of like whoever's on there using it the most wins the day. And
That was
guess
so
what?
fun.
Was I met my husband on Twitter.
What?
It was like the world's first free dating app. Yes, we met on Twitter.
Oh my God, I
And
love that
then
so much.
I also became a social media influencer. And I was one of the top 10 influencers in Toronto. And I won a ticket wherever Virgin America flew in North America when it used to come to Canada. And so I'd go hightail it back and forth to San Francisco because that's where Dan lived at the time. So in those moments of really not knowing what I was doing, but like partially from being bored at work, but also with really cool bosses telling me to figure out content marketing, to figure out SEO and blogging and social, people kept coming to me to ask, how are we going to use this for business? And then I started to get hired by bigger companies, so like College Pro Painters and other companies locally to help them strategize how to leverage content marketing and social media, which then led to my first social media agency that I co-partnered with somebody years ago. Oh my gosh, I forgot about this. And then I sold it to him because I wanted out. And then my big agency, which was called Onboardly, and I worked with funded tech companies. And this was the one that this was the home run. And
Okay.
we did really well. So in starting that agency, what happened was I was really well versed in social media and content marketing and advertising. I knew Facebook ads and Google ads back then. And I partnered with a woman who understood public relations and was working with technology companies. And we started to work on a lot of projects together to the point where I suggested that we work together. And then we co-founded the agency.
Hmm.
And then this is where like we're going to go juicy with this too because here was a what we called demand marketing agency and there was two of us doing all the things.
All the demand generation.
All the things.
So, a
Yes.
couple things before we get into that. So the sort of strategy that we're really diving into here is this idea of focusing, of subtracting, of refining, of simplifying in order to create more scale. Um, but before we get there, I want to jump into Onboardly for a moment. So, roughly what year did you found this agency?
2012.
2012.
Yeah.
And how did you decide on your niche? Like, how did you decide that it was going to be funded tech companies only? I'm curious about that decision because I think who we work with is a massively important choice in business, almost as important as what we do. How did you make that decision in terms of that particular clientele?
Such a good question. So for me, when I was going back and forth to San Francisco, I was actually bringing my laptop and parking my butt at some of the startups. These were like growing startups. So I understood the landscape, but what I really got insight into was back in those days, man, those startups were raising a crap ton of cash and they had a lot of cash. And I was like, pay me and I'll do this for you. And they're like, there you go. And it just happened that way. So we really we dove into Crunchbase. We understood the funding rounds and how this worked and when actually people deployed capital and who they hired and when to know that these are companies that are getting millions and millions of dollars, mostly for marketing or engineers. And we were a tiny part of that marketing budget. So we were able to just sink our teeth into some of those companies because of that. So
Mm,
we followed the cash. We said no
yeah,
to the companies we knew would be tough. And we could talk about that, but it's not really that important. We
yeah.
knew the companies who were well funded and we approached them.
So you make a really strategic choice around who you're going to work with. And I wanted to sort of double click on that because I think that the choice of, again, the industry or the type of client that you have, the difference between, working with a client base who has money to invest in the thing that you offer versus those that you don't, it can
Yep.
just simplify and streamline, the growth
Oh my
process.
gosh.
So I just thought that
Yeah.
was a very smart decision. So walk us through what happened at Onboardly. So you team up with somebody who has complementary expertise. You
Yeah.
launch this agency. And my understanding is that you experienced fairly rapid success and growth. Yes, it was the two of you, but you guys were cranking and really producing. Walk us through what that early success kind of looked like, what some of those early results were, and just what it looked like inside your company at that time.
Oh man, what a mess. So, first of all, that company was incorporated in June of 2012. My first son, Max, was born in August of 2012. 11 months later, my second son was born. So, besides the actual growth of a business, I was struggling to manage becoming a mother times
Yeah.
2 in that same year, which I actually feel played a massive and had a massive influence on the growth of that business because we had to prioritize stuff.
Mm,
But with that company coming in with me saying, we need to do content marketing and social and ads, and Heather coming in saying, I understand the PR world, we were able to say, here's our full service offering, which was the biggest mistake we made to start off with. However, we were able to secure some anchor clients. So, anchor clients are the ones that pay the bills, right? You think about your monthly expenses. Here's the one client that pays the bills and everyone else's profit. And we ended up doing everything for them. And I'm talking like we were a team of 4 at the beginning. We were writing weekly LinkedIn articles, 4 or 5 articles a week on one of our clients' blog, and then contributed content as well as doing PR and pitching radio and media. It was a lot. We were burnt out. And when we finally had enough data after a year, I think it was year 2, we looked at what service actually produced the highest profit margin. And it was clear as day. It was public relations. Like, not only that, but we could charge more for what we were doing without having to do any of the content marketing or social stuff. So we just stopped offering that publicly. And before we knew it, we were landing bigger deals offering one thing.
okay, so this is fascinating to me. So after a year, you've got the data, you're studying your numbers, and you identify that PR is the most profitable. What percentage of your total revenue was coming from PR?
Oh, I don't
Mm.
remember.
Yeah. Was
I'm
it
going to
big? Was
just
it small? Was it like half? I'm curious about like
it was
proportionally.
probably about it was probably about half.
Okay.
Yeah. It was about
And
50%.
yeah, so significant, but still there was a significant amount of revenue that was non-PR related. So can you
Mhm.
walk us through like the decision to cut everything else or to stop offering it? Like what were some of the kind of emotional negotiations or inner negotiations you guys made with yourselves, or was it just kind of an easy decision and you just,
So
you just
easy.
did it?
We had our team members, we never billed based on time. We had net zero terms, which was like if you have service-based business, highly recommend that. We had everybody track their time no matter what, because internally we need to know where people were working and what results they were producing. So over the course of months, we determined that creating content in those days, as well as social media strategy, was consuming the most amount of time for the smallest return. So if, employee A was working 20 hours a week to do this and that value was only, a certain percentage of the revenue from that company, we're like, well, why are we doing this?
Yeah.
And so we just stopped offering it. So we still like the contracts currently dried up and we kept doing some of that stuff for them, but going forward we just didn't offer it.
Mm. So what was the result of that? Like, how did that transform? So, and let me check in approximately. So this was basically after your first year. So, your
Yeah. I think
two
like
kids,
first or second year
first or second year.
probably.
So you've got like a
Yeah.
couple kids under two, and you've
Yeah.
made this big decision in the business. How did things change as a result of essentially cutting
Mm.
50%, cutting revenue streams that sourced 50% of your total growth?
So it wasn't actually cutting that revenue. It was just no longer offering it.
Right.
So
That's right.
we worked with a company called, actually, we worked with a guy called Greg Crabtree. He wrote a book, Simple Numbers,
Simple
and they
numbers.
created very complex financial models for us, of which I didn't understand how to read. I just needed to look at one line item. So every month they would produce the report, send it to us, and we would talk for about 1 to 2 hours. And I just needed to know my labor efficiency ratio. So the utilization of my team. That was it. Heather was looking at other stuff. This number would tell me whether my team was overworked or underworked. And both were horrible options. So I needed to know if I needed to get jumping on sales calls or hire somebody else. So that was it for me. Very simple.
Mm.
And for the first while, their labor efficiency ratio was very high. They were overworked. And when I looked at the things they were working on, I said, we can pull back on that and let's start focusing somewhere else. So all of the decisions that we made in the business were deep in the numbers. And yes, we had feelings and emotions come through too, but the data is there. It shows you. It shows you exactly what you need to be focusing your time on. And we went hard on that, really hard, and only sold that. If somebody wanted social, we would make a recommendation for another company. And we were okay losing accounts too if we couldn't do the work because we just wouldn't do great work if we did it all.
Yeah. So, a couple years into that strategy, I'm curious about the impact on the business. How did it impact growth? How did it impact profitability? How did it impact your capacity as a leader?
Well, I had more time back.
Mm.
I remember these moments where I was like breastfeeding one child, trying to feed another child, editing blog posts. And I just, it was just so silly to me that I was doing this because there was nobody else in the team that had capacity on a Saturday morning to get this done for Monday. It was me. And I go, for what? For how many impressions? For what is this actually going to do for the company? It's in the contract, but so it was those moments. And that's where going back to like having both those boys in the same year really made things clear to me that if I can work this hard doing one thing, imagine how great a work we can do as opposed to doing many, many things, right?
Mm.
That's like mediocrity.
Yeah.
Sure, we can offer all this stuff, but that's not who we are. It's not where we need to be investing our time. Plus, getting that time back allowed us to build deeper relationships with the media, deeper understanding of the brand and how to get them on TV, how to get them on the radio, on podcasts. We actually started doing better work because of it.
Mm. So you got your time back. You were able to the as you started to do fewer things in the agency, you started to develop even deeper expertise in that. And was it more of a profitability move? So sort of it improved profits, but overall growth stayed the same, or did it move a bunch of metrics, that decision?
Everything went up like a hockey stick.
Mm.
So profitability, team, like even morale within the organization, because people weren't stressed doing all these things, we had much clearer focus. Then when we go on to cold calling or sales calls, it was just more clear what we offered. We do
Yeah.
this, we don't do that, and we only do this, and we're really good at it. So if that's what you want, we can help you. And if you want all these other things, we don't do that. But we
Yeah.
have partners that can offer that service for you. So profits went up. Were able to scale more because we were able to bring on more clients at a higher price point, and our team wasn't as overworked as it once was.
Mm, that's powerful. I can hear entrepreneurs asking, okay, as you started to refer away that business, were you just simply doing straight referrals, or did you develop like referral fees or partnership programs with the complementary companies that you were referring out business to? How did you choose to handle that?
So here's what happened in creating more capacity in our calendar is we were actually able to start to treat ourselves like our own clients. So wherever the time went in the week to service our accounts, we did it for ourselves as well. So the things that we were
Mm.
working for them, we would do for ourselves. Then we'd also use our brand as a guinea pig for new initiatives or new ideas. And just by doing that allowed us to attract better clients. and bigger clients from all over the world, from like Sweden to South Africa to San Diego.
I love it. So, so how long did this walk us through what ultimately happened with Onboardly? So you
Yeah.
start to accomplish hockey stick growth, which is exciting. And it's not what you're now you have another PR and authority company, which is very cool. So let's kind of take us from Onboardly to what you're doing today. Because how
So,
you did things on Onboardly definitely shaped what you're doing today and how you're doing
oh
them.
yeah.
So yeah, walk us through what sort of your what where you left off with Onboardly and how you started your new company.
Oh, I mean, it's a sad ending. It's not what people want to hear, but here's the truth. And I think it's relevant and it's relatable that we my business partner at the time, she was 50-50 in the company and we both knew our roles quite well. We played very well together. She just got up and left. And I thought it was me. It had nothing to do with me because not only did she leave us, but she divorced her husband and moved to another province. So I was like, okay,
Yeah.
midlife crisis.
Yes.
But then
Big shift.
but then
Yeah.
I think yeah, I'm like, it hurt. It hurt
Yeah.
losing a best friend. It also I felt so unworthy. And I also felt such an insatiable responsibility to grow this thing, to keep everybody happy. But you have to remember, my kids were still young.
Yeah.
And at the same time, my husband was flying all over the place, raising money for his startup. All these things were happening. And just a bunch of messed up things happen in those few years. Before she left, we were going through due diligence to be acquired, and it almost happened. It almost happened. And what it came down to was two things was the earnout was less than our projected sales growth. And we weren't sure that our team would be happy with this transition and probably wouldn't want to make the move. And it was important that the team would go and work for this company. I
Yeah.
just didn't think it was going to happen. So we kind of said no. And I'm such an authentic person. Hiding this entire experience from the team, I just felt like such a cheat and a lie. I couldn't go through with it.
Yeah.
So when Heather left, I was like, okay, that option's off the table completely. I'll figure out how to make this work. And then I couldn't. I lost I lost the motivation. I was exhausted from all those years of working so many hours and not being with my kids, missing milestones, all these things. And I knew this was like the rejection was God's protection. I knew that I needed to figure something else out.
Mm.
So eventually I shut the doors. I had an incredible client base at the time, slowly started to lay off the team, which was so hard, so tough. And then essentially handed all of the clients over to my director of PR who wanted to start her own company anyway. So it was like a seamless transition. And then I turned it off.
Mm.
And then a few years later, sold all the assets for the brand, which was kind of cool. Um, and just sat in it. And what I realized in the time was like, I asked myself, would I ever do this again? And I said, no, I would never do this again. Here's the fun fact in all this and growing this agency is in all the years I ran Onboardly, I never pitched the media a day in my life. I didn't do any PR because I didn't know how to do it. I had never done it. I knew how to grow the company, hire the people, create the process, close the deals, which is needed in an agency. And all the other people on the team loved their roles and they were great at it. So then when I moved to Kelowna and I invested into a group out here, I became my first time angel investor. Some of those companies knew of my experience in PR and said, "Hey Renee, can we hire you to do our PR?" And I'm an investor. And I said, can I charge for this? Of course I can. So I actually charged them, going into it thinking, Renee, you've never done this before. You've actually never pitched the media. So good luck with that. And I made it work because we had all the templates and processes from all those years being successful. It was very easy to just carbon copy that into what I was doing, but also only coming up with two ways to work with me. There wasn't a million options. There were only two options to work with me. I said, what am I passionate about? With strategy and then working with a very select few retainer clients in the industry. And I'm a small team of three.
What do you love about the business you've built?
I love the freedom to choose who I get to work with. I love the people that I work with. Um, what's interesting is kind of like in this season, there's such a massive shift in the industry, in media, since especially the pandemic, that we're all kind of in this together. And there's just overarching sense of like dire need for help, but also knowing that we're all learning this at the same time. Because it used to be that public relations was the most trusted form of media over anything else, and that's now dying. It used
Yeah.
to be that all the top publications had staff writers, and that was easy to build relationships with them. They would stay there for years, and now they've all been laid off. And so now they're all freelancers, and the industry's become quite tough. So it's shifting. And to recognize the shift means there's opportunity in it as well. And seeking that opportunity is what has allowed me to stay afloat in this crazy world.
Yeah, yeah, it is. When you think about like the core, what would you say has been the core lesson that you took from your experience building and scaling up on Boardly that you've applied to your company today?
All the boring stuff, all the operating procedures, contracts, being very, very clear with what they get and what they don't get. We used to be like really hesitant to be like, oh, we'll just do what we can for you and we'll do
Mhm.
whatever you need. Now I'm like, no, line items of the things that we do and we don't do, to the point where we actually put in our contract how many pitches we pitch a week
Yeah.
and how that operates. Because not only does it hold us accountable, but the clients can come at us and say, well, why didn't you pitch 20 last week? It's like, well, we
Mm.
agreed to 10, and here's why. The clarity in how we work and the experience for the client too. Doesn't have to be fancy, but if you say, hey, every Friday morning you're going to get a report and here's the report, then just make it happen. Um, Also, the best growth in being an entrepreneur is through failures. And I had been on some like nasty sales calls. I've had to I was sued for wrongful dismissal.
Oh,
You can't learn about that unless you go through it. It's not like you're going to be like, this weekend I'm going to learn about wrongful dismissal because I feel like it. Like, you have to go through those crap sandwiches sometimes to understand how to operate. So now, if this was to happen to me, I would know the process. I know what to expect. I
yeah.
know it doesn't just solve itself overnight, and there's going to be a lengthy process because that's what happens. Um, Luckily, I won. I hate saying the word won. Luckily, there was just no grounds for what happened. It was
Yeah.
just a employee who didn't like being laid off,
Yeah.
and that's okay. But man, it forces you to build a thicker backbone. It
Yeah.
forces you to understand certain parts of the business that are really important for you to know. Most people ignore because they think that ain't gonna happen to me. No, and it does. And if you're prepared for it, then emotionally you can show up. So when this stuff was happening, I was so devastated because I was so insulted by the fact that somebody who I treated so well would do this to me, that going to work for a couple weeks was tough.
Yeah.
I would show up without any makeup on, looking disheveled. And like, luckily, this was during the pantsuit nation movement. So, like, women not wearing makeup to work was like the cool thing for those few weeks. And I was like, wow, what luck. And I was like, pantsuit nation. No, I was dying inside. But those lessons, it's like a notch on the belt. It's like everything you fail at becomes the best lesson. And
Yeah.
you actually can't get better as an entrepreneur unless you've experienced them.
Yeah, and also I think it starts to normalize this idea that hey, I'm going to get through this, and that often things are never as bad as they seem. Like when you're in it, it can feel just awful, and it is awful. But when you get through something, it really creates that, like you said, it creates that backbone, but it also creates this really powerful perspective. How do you define success today? So you've had, the $1 million business where you were breastfeeding and editing, on a Saturday morning. How do you now define success in business? What does it look like for you? What are the metrics that you measure and that are meaningful to you now? Labor
To
efficiency, we
have
know. I love
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Come on.
obviously,
Let's give it up for
efficiency.
LER. Yeah.
Yeah, there we go. To have the resources to be able to pursue what you're passionate about. And
Mhm.
I don't mean just money, but time freedom, having the right community and network, having your health, having a great place to call home. It's safe, it's inclusive, and they push you to try harder. Um, Having great friends, having people that I can call at any point and they'll just guide me in the right direction, having my family. Like when you believe that the world is abundant, that there's enough for everybody because there really is. The actual richness in terms of financial richness shows up.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be $1 billion for you. Some people that's important. But for some, it's like, hey, I want to make $100,000 a year because that's going to support this lifestyle and I'm happy.
Mm.
And that's cool. That is so cool. But I think there's been, and I can see this adjustment happening in the world too, especially because feminine energy is just oozing out everywhere. That we're really about nurturing each other. And my husband always comes to me. He's like, if I lost this all, Renee, if I lost everything that we have, would you be okay? And I said, depends what you did. And as long as we're okay, as long as you and I are like, fine. And he goes, good. Because I know that if I opened up my phone or Instagram or Facebook or I walked into the studio, that I would have the means and the people that I need to get back to where I was.
Mm.
People are the most important asset we have, employees, family, team members, community. Like, think about it,
It's true.
Eleanor, I don't know you otherwise.
Yeah.
And now we're going to go
And what a
travel
loss
together.
that
Like,
would be
oh, terrible.
for
I
both of
mean,
us.
tall
Yeah,
girls need to find each other.
they
It's
do.
mandatory.
100%.
Yeah. So that's it. Success is that.
Yeah. Beautiful. I want to thank you so much for sharing the story and experience with us. This is the first time that anybody other than myself has talked about labor efficiency ratio on the podcast, and I just have a
You're
massive love
nerdy
for the term. I know,
like
so
me.
nerdy, and I love it so much. So I really appreciate that. But I think really walking us through in a very specific and practical way how you really simplified in your first agency, and then how you sort of took that approach to design the second business that you are running today is very cool. So, speaking of the business you're running today and the work that you do today, I would love for you to share where can folks go to get into your world, to connect with you, to learn more about the work that you're doing, to learn from you how to build their own authority. Where should they go?
So, kind of cool news that is quasi public now is that I sold my agency.
Oh my God, amazing!
Yes.
Let's
I
go.
actually went through with it this time and it
You
happened.
did.
It is such a cool feeling. So it's a company out of Denver called Best Practice Media. They want to create a full service agency. They didn't have the PR department. And I said, let's make it happen.
Yes.
And so it's coming to conclusion this year.
Wow.
Um, that being said, is I'm still doing there's one thing I'm still doing because I do absolutely love, love, love it is my 30-day strategy build outs where I create your entire PR strategy, including pitch angles, media list, all that stuff. I'm passionate about it. I would do that over a cup of coffee in the morning.
Mm.
But where people can find me online is they can check out my podcast called Into the Wild or find me on Instagram, Renee_Warren.
Thank you for being here.
Thanks for